Hello, everyone. It's Lacey with the Your Lyme Matters podcast, and I am joined today with Sara Yavis. Hello, Sara.
Hi, Lacey. Very happy to be
Welcome.
here.
Thanks so much for joining us. We greatly appreciate it. Why don't you just first start off with telling us where are you located?
Yeah, so I am from Drumheller, Alberta.
So, for people maybe not familiar with your landscape, is it mountainous? Is it drier,
Mhm.
desertish? Also, in terms of the tick risk of that area too.
For sure. Drumheller is actually located in a valley, considered a Badlands area. We have the hoodoos and all the hills, and it's a really beautiful area. Drumheller is probably most known for its dinosaurs and our Tyrrell Museum. In terms of the tick side of things, there are lots of ticks in the area. I'm sure we'll get into this eventually. I wasn't bitten in Drumheller. I just happened to grow up and live there. But I do know that there's lots of people in the area that also have Lyme disease. And yeah, ticks, everyone's definitely on the lookout for ticks there.
When you
Yeah.
describe the Badlands, I believe in some areas, almost sandy
It's
dirt
like
or
clay.
clay. Okay,
Yeah.
clayey. And ticks can still be in those areas from the sounds.
Yeah, and there's lots of areas with long grass and that kind of thing, and that's primarily obviously where they are. But yeah, they're
Oh,
around.
now you started to kind of mention you were not actually bit. So does this mean you actually recall getting bit at some point in time,
No,
or?
No, but just by a process of timing and figuring things out. I've seen ticks since that time, but 2 weeks before I got really, really sick with this awful flu, my partner and I were camping down it was either Washington or like Northern California. We were on a road trip and I can't remember exactly where we are, but I remember the campsite because we found this beautiful camp spot and we were like, oh, I can't believe no one's in this particular spot because it was just really beautiful. Anyways, we set up the tent and we're like, I think we were playing cards or something. And all of a sudden we noticed the tent was just covered in ticks. And there was two ticks inside, like as we were playing cards, and it was horrendous.
No, that sounds
Yeah,
like a horror
it
movie.
was. There was a couple of things from that trip
What?
that were just unbelievable.
I'm
They were
just
so bad.
picturing, because those of us that have camp know if you put a light in there or a flashlight, that's creepy, like the shadows of
Yeah,
those things.
Yeah, it was
Okay.
horrible. So, anyways, we from that night checked ourselves and our stuff thoroughly because we only stayed there the one night and then we carried on. And I never did find a tick on me, but it was years later because I my health just deteriorated. It was years later that a friend told me that Sarah, the ticks can be the size of a ballpoint pen tip and you would never see them and you would never know that they bit you. So that's the thing, that like little piece of information that a friend randomly passed on. That was the part of the reason why I went and got tested eventually.
So not necessarily a visible tick on
No.
you. However, you did have some experiences and there would be risk factors to have been bitten by something
Yeah.
not visible to the human eye. And Sarah is
Yeah.
referencing, for people listening, the nymphal stage of ticks. They're so small, you're unlikely to actually be able to see them just a quick glance with the eyes. It's very difficult. If you have really good eyes, better than me perhaps, but they're very difficult. You can barely see them. So
Yeah.
so you went and got tested. And
A few years later.
a few years after that. Okay, so did you
Yeah.
have some symptoms starting in these years leading up to it,
Yeah,
or?
I did. Looking back, it all makes sense. But at the time when I had gotten sick, so like we were on that camping trip, and then about 2 weeks later, had just the worst flu of my life. And it was in the summer too. I was like, this is so strange, but didn't piece anything together because I didn't know enough at the time. And within a matter of weeks after that, because I was in university at the time, so the fall semester had started, and my symptoms for those first 2 years were a ton of lymphatic swelling, but it would come and go. So my doctor just kept thinking that it was hormonal. And then, so yeah, tons of lymphatic swelling, increased anxiety, which because I was in university and I was having a difficult time in university, just kind of adjusting and mentally getting myself through. So I internalized that and thought maybe I'm just having a really hard time with this whole experience. I didn't see the two as being connected. The third one was more of the brain fog and the word recall was kind of the
Okay.
third one. So those were my main symptoms for the first 2 years. And then it progressed after that.
And when it
Yeah.
progressed, what types of symptoms were you starting to feel at that point?
Yeah, so those were my symptoms for the first 2 years. So we're coming up to like this is 9 years ago when my symptoms really started to progress. Because I was just finishing university and The lymphatic swelling at that point was unbearable. I was in a lot of pain all the time. And so I went back to my doctor. I'd been to her a couple of times throughout that 2-year process. And I adore her, but she just wasn't very helpful. She'd be like, oh, it's just hormones, like just it'll be okay, and just kind of brushed me off. And then when I went back, I remember I was in pain sleeping. I was in pain to have clothes on. It was just really uncomfortable. So that was in about June of 2016 when I finally went to the doctor, when I was like, something is wrong. But a couple of months before that, even, I was down in Arizona with my family. We'd gone to an air show and it was really, really hot out. And I had a history of heat stroke just due to being young and a bit careless sometimes. And it was at least 30 degrees, probably between 30 and 40 degrees out there. And we're on the tarmac, right? So it's super hot. But I knew that I was kind of sensitive to the sun. So we had umbrellas, I had water. I was so prepared. I wasn't really in the sun at all, but I could not handle the heat whatsoever. I ended up getting really, really sick, like being on the floor. My family, I kind of teased, had to drag me out of there. Not quite, but I literally made it back to my dad's house at the time, laid on the floor in the bathroom for the rest of the night, and just felt like I had really bad heat stroke, but there wasn't really an explanation for it. Later, I learned, oh, that was probably the Lyme, because the Lyme impacts your body's ability to regulate with the temperature. And so that was another symptom that had kind of started that year, was just couldn't be in the heat, couldn't be in the sun. Word recall was really, really, really bad at that time, and continued to be really bad. That's the only thing that I still struggle with. That, and then extreme food sensitivities. I don't know what happened at that time, but 9 years ago, this time of year, yeah, food sensitivities just kind of erupted in my life.
Did
So
they
like,
did they change the food sensitivities, or was it always one food?
so now I don't have any food sensitivities, other than I can feel certain foods just aren't great and have no nutritional value, right? And so I'm like, I can feel it when I eat crappy for a while. But before, I couldn't have gluten, no dairy, sugar even. I was very, very sensitive to sugar. And so fruits and that kind of sugars I was able to digest and process fine, but any sort of artificial sweeteners, even just like regular sugar, couldn't
Yeah.
have any of that. So I ate very, very clean for quite a few years.
And Sarah,
Yeah.
you mentioned lymphatic swelling. I'm curious, do you remember, was there a
Yeah.
specific location it started and then did it change, or was it the same location?
It was primarily armpits, breast tissue, that area primarily, but I did have some in the throat,
Like under here? Yeah.
the neck, in the chest area, and then a little bit like groin leg area as well. But the worst was definitely armpit and the breast tissue. That's when I was talking about that it hurt to wear clothes, it hurt to sleep. That was really uncomfortable.
I think people don't necessarily realize when lymph gets super backed up or when it's just not
Yeah,
flowing well, it can be uncomfortable and
like
painful. And
painful. Yeah.
it's like you can feel it's stuck. You're kind of like it's
Oh, it's
backed up
yeah, like
and it's stuck. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
it's like you want to like just crawl out of your skin. And that's,
Yeah.
I think so many of Lyme symptoms people can't see,
Yeah.
right? Because it's like, well, I'm talking normally and whatever, and maybe I'm a bit tired, but a lot of people, it's easy to overlook them. But it's like, I'm 9 out of 10 or 10 out of 10 in pain right now. And this is
Yeah.
just normal.
And you're mentioning the big elephant in the room with these diagnoses, and it causes so many issues, and even the way people interact with people who are diagnosed with Lyme and co-infections, because they can't see it. And I think oftentimes
Yeah.
some of us with it even forget that. How did you come to thinking maybe this is Lyme disease, maybe I should go get some testing? Because it sounds like your family practitioner is not super helpful in this scenario.
So at that time, so 9 years ago, when I was like, something's really not okay, like this isn't just in my head anymore or just hormonal fluctuations, I went back to my doctor, and I don't remember her ever feeling my lymph nodes before. Maybe she did, but I can't remember. But I do know that this time when I went to her 9 years ago, she felt my lymph nodes and I could see a shift in her. She was worried and she said, forget exactly what she said, but she basically implied that maybe it was cancer. And she was like, I'm going to send you for all this blood work. And I was kind of like, well, thank you for taking myself serious, like taking me seriously. I was mad though, because I've been coming for 2 years and now you're saying that maybe it's, I don't even like to say the word cancer, but like it's now
Yeah.
this. And so I
Like, I'll
have to
just say,
be,
in a
yeah,
hypothetical situation, what if
yeah,
it was and you waited 2 years,
I
right? Like,
know.
that's a
And
long time for cancer to do its thing.
to do,
But
yeah, right. And so, but you know what I took away from that? I went because actually that was on my birthday that I had this doctor's appointment, and then we were planning to go camping that weekend. And so, and then my grad was the next Monday from university. So it was kind of a big weekend for a variety of things. Anyways, the thing that I took from it though, because I was so angry with her, and then I realized actually I'm angry at myself because I knew that something was wrong for 2 years. And yes, I was reaching out for help, but I was kind of disappointed in myself. Why didn't I try other avenues? I was careful even then not to blame myself too much because I didn't know much about naturopathic doctors. I didn't know much about alternative health at the time. I was starting to learn more for other unrelated reasons. But that was kind of my moment of like, I'm not putting all my power in this doctor anymore. I am going to just do what I can do to help myself, and I'm not giving up, and I'm going to try every avenue I possibly can. And so that was while I was mad and I was frustrated and disappointed and just feeling all these emotions based on feeling like I wasn't heard for the last 2 years. I kind of used it as motivation. I am going to just try everything I can because even if the test had come back and it was cancer, I knew that I wasn't going to go the traditional route because I was already so mad that that hadn't like worked
yeah,
out, right? Like,
yeah.
so after that, I sought out a naturopathic doctor. And he was okay. He definitely was a great introduction for me in terms of naturopathic medicine, but I was freshly graduated student. I was too sick to really work, and money was not growing on trees,
It it
as is
it
the case for
it's
most of us,
frustrating that it doesn't. That's the true
right?
injustice, is that it doesn't grow on the trees. I have an issue with that as well. But apologies, carry on.
Yeah, and so I felt that he was kind of just throwing darts to see what kind of treatment worked because he also didn't know what was going on with me. We were kind of just trying to treat or manage the symptoms I was presenting with. So looking back though, and I've had other naturopaths since then. He didn't recommend any testing. There was nothing. We were just literally, he was recommending supplements to treat the symptoms I had, which was kind of helpful in a way, but long term, that was not going to fly. I couldn't pay for that and didn't want to pay for that. That just seemed a little too chaotic. Well, I can't remember how long I was with him. I bet you I was with him for probably a year and a half on and off. Not super consistent because again, like it was a crazy amount of money in it. I still didn't know what was going on, right?
No,
The
it's okay.
same summer, so 9 years ago, I had a friend who is very, very intelligent when it comes to Lyme. She has it. She is just brilliant. Like you and her would have a phenomenal conversation.
Oh, I love this stuff. Whoever will let me talk about it with them, I will talk about it with them.
And she,
Yeah.
yeah, and so she has been such a massive advocate for a lot of people and like kind of an educator in a lot of ways. Even back then, 9 years ago, she suggested that I go get tested. But at that time, I was like, no, like I've never been bitten. I don't know if I said I've never been around them because I don't know if that time camping really clicked then.
Mhm.
But I was just like, I've never been bitten. Like I've never found one on me. I did brush her off. And looking back, kicking myself now, but there's a time for everything. So a year and a half goes by. I'm just getting progressively worse. And it got to the point where at that point in time, so a year and a half later, I was working an environmental science job and I was around a lot of contaminants. We were working with dirty water samples, soil samples, just all kinds of stuff. And I was feeling it in my body. And then I don't know if it was just a combination of the work or what, but then I really started to deteriorate again in a big way. And I just couldn't function. And so I reached out to that friend and I didn't want testing. All that I wanted to know if there was a support group in Calgary for people who were dealing with autoimmune conditions or health issues because I was struggling mentally. I was really struggling to just keep it together and I was just having a really hard time. And she said, I can't remember what her response was in regards to there being a support group, but I remember that she was like, I really think you should get tested.
Mm.
And at that point, I was like, maybe I'll just get tested so that I can cross it off the list. Because at that point, hadn't been tested for anything else. And can't remember how this conversation happened, but another friend and I were talking. This other friend also is from Drumheller and also has Lyme, or had at least Lyme at the time. And she was the one that told me, because I said, this one lady, she's telling me to go get tested. I think I'm going to. And she says, you should. She said, they can be so small that you wouldn't see them. You wouldn't ever necessarily know you've been bitten. And I was like, what? And that's when all the things started aligning in my mind of the timeline of like, okay, we were camping at this place where they were very prominent. And then 2 weeks later, I was very, very sick. And then really since then, the symptoms. So putting all the pieces together in my head. So I went to the Chinese medicine doctor in Calgary, and that's where I was referred to go to for physical health support, but also to get the blood work, to send the blood work over. And so I never was tested. I never had my blood work done in Canada. I only had my blood work taken and sent to Germany. It's at Armin Lab.
Yeah. Did you test for Lyme, or did you test for co-infections with Lyme at that point?
The Lyme and the co-infections. So that came back and was positive, and that was such a relief, honestly, to have an answer.
I was super excited also to have that positive, because at least you have an answer,
Yeah.
but at the same time can be a very heavy road ahead. Did you know at that time what the treatment road might look like?
No.
Yeah.
Well, I don't think that I did. But again, my whole journey, I honestly have a bit of shame or embarrassment when I talk about my journey, because I was so lucky that I had this friend that was so just intelligent, right? Had done so much research, knew all about the things. I would kind of just go to her and she would just direct me somewhere. And so this is partially out of ignorance and partially because I never wanted to like dig into knowing too much about Lyme, because I felt like then it would be harder for me to like separate myself from it, which I don't necessarily think is the right thing to do, but that's what I chose to do at the time. So like she just told me where to go. And so I went to this Chinese medicine doctor and I just followed her treatment. And that was kind of all I did. And I had a lot of progress in my healing journey until I didn't. I did hit a point where it wasn't budging.
Curiosity,
Yeah.
what percentage, let's just say 0 is your
Yeah.
sickest, 100% is symptom free, or whatever you want
Yeah.
to call it,
Yeah.
free of suffering and symptoms. How far
Yeah.
did it go till it plateaued, would you say?
I'd say around 70%,
Nice.
70%. Yeah. So it was
Yeah.
definitely significant.
Yeah.
I felt a lot better doing the treatment and taking the supplements that I was taking and navigating it that way. I just couldn't get past this one part of it. And this is like probably rather unconventional. But that's when I really started diving into the trauma therapy.
Are you comfortable to talk about that?
Yep. Yep.
Okay, I just double check. I usually ask at the start, and I completely forgot to ask
That's
you.
fair.
But I always like to make sure, because I tell people that my goal on this podcast is not to trigger people and put them into a sympathetic nervous system state as much as possible. So there, in our communities, there's a really big link with unhealed traumas, whether they happen in childhood, whether they're happening right around your illness when you're refused care, you're gaslit. So at this point in your healing journey, it sounds like you're pivoting a bit and you're going to work on some of your own trauma. Is that correct? Are you okay to say what modalities of trauma healing?
Yeah. So a little bit of everything. The other thing to mention is about 6.5 years ago. So I started the treatment and it was the Cowden protocol, but we had to like build up to even starting that, right? So anyways, I started doing really well. The financial side of things was always present, right? How am I going to pay for this? What am I going to do? Right? Everything's out of pocket. I ended up having to leave my job right around the same time that I was diagnosed. I ended up having to leave my job because health-wise, I wasn't doing very well. And by not doing well, I should preface that I can remember it was so hard for me to have a shower. I can remember just the journey of having a shower in a day was like climbing a mountain. And people that have autoimmune stuff understand that, but other people don't understand how that's even possible. And I remember when it comes to the cognitive functioning side of things, it's like the number of decisions that are involved in having a shower and choosing your clothes and getting ready after. There's so many decisions. And when I was in that state, that was very overwhelming. I couldn't even think about what clothes I was going to, I would literally just grab sweatpants and a shirt. I don't know if you relate with that, but like
Oh,
couldn't put that
100%.
together. Just like
Yeah.
all the steps. I remember at my worst, sitting on my bed, wrapped in my towel after having a shower, just crying. My partner was brushing my hair for me. I just couldn't function.
Yeah.
And so I had left my job because I just couldn't function. We moved actually from Calgary to Vancouver Island to Victoria because I literally thought I was dying. And I was like, you know what? If I'm dying, let's go live somewhere nice for this year. And at that point in time, I had started to get really connected to nature, and nature was so healing and so soothing for me. I just wanted to be outside all the time. So we moved out there. I didn't work for 7 months, I think it was, but I was doing treatment. I had some income because my sister and I had an Airbnb, very synchronous that all worked.
Sara, is this still
Yeah.
Cowden treatment or is this a
Yeah.
slightly adjusted? Okay, so still
No, this
Cowden.
is still Cowden. This was
Okay.
like the beginning
Okay.
of that journey. So then I move out to Victoria, and for the first 7 months that I was out there, I didn't work. I was just outside all the time, like hanging with the forest and the old growth forest, and it was just
They
so
have
beautiful.
beautiful there's a different feel in the BC forest. It's like
Yeah,
you could like breathe it in
just
when you get
breathe
there. You're
it.
like,
Yeah.
whew, yes, that
The
feels good.
ocean.
Yeah, it's
Yeah,
beautiful.
it
Yeah.
was. And that was so healing for me. And we were so lucky. We lived right across from one of the old growth forests at Royal Roads University. So I would just go barefoot, walk through the forest almost every single day in meditation, in kind of like prayer, um, and doing my treatment. And I started to get better. And then once I started working, I worked out there. This was also, I think, very helpful for my healing journey. I worked at a chiropractic office, and they are, again, just brilliant people. They helped me so much. I was doing chiropractic adjustments from them once a week, kind of as a part of my job. And it's different. It's not the manual adjustment. And it's like this little pen gun thing. I'm so bad because I don't remember the actual name of it, but it was very subtle adjustments, very easy on my body, my nervous system. And
Oh, okay.
that was phenomenal. Yeah, it was very, very good. And then there was another lady that they knew. She was also a chiropractic doctor. And again, I don't know the name of it, so I apologize to anyone listening to this, but hopefully someone will know what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
But she does, and it was the coolest thing. The only way that I can describe it is emotional chiropractic. So you would lay down on the table, she would ask a series of questions while she's like moving my feet, and then she would just know, and she would like ask me these questions and adjust me. But it was more on the mental, emotional realm. She was adjusting me physically, but she was asking me these questions. And I think it was pinpointing what was kind of stuck in my system and then releasing it.
Yeah.
So I was also doing that. And then I got a new naturopathic doctor while I was out there. And she was very test focused. So we did like SIBO testing, had that. So she helped me clear that. There was a couple other things that I did with her as well. So still doing my treatment with the Chinese medicine doctor in Calgary, while also just navigating all this other stuff on the island. After a year of being out there, moved back here to Drumheller for a job and started working steady. So then I had money so that I was able to pour more money
Yay.
at the like
It's exciting when
treatment.
you do. Yeah.
It really was. There's part of me that's like, oh, it's so exciting that I have this career now and I have this money, but still did not have money. All the money is being thrown towards treatment, which was $1,000 a month
Yeah.
for a number of years. And that was just significant. And it's funny because now I still very money conscious and stuff, but my value system is very much I will spend whatever on like health, good food, supplements, that is totally where my priority is for
Yeah.
budgeting and finances. But yeah, so moved back home, was able to continue treatment in a big way when I was making money and had a good job and was feeling quite stable health wise. It was maybe 3 years after I moved home when I started to feel the plateau. I had done a little bit of EMDR when I was in Victoria, a couple of sessions, and that kind of opened my eyes to how impactful or helpful that was for me. So then once my benefits kicked in with this job that I had in Drumheller, started up with a new psychologist. And so I've done EMDR quite a bit, worked through quite a bit with the EMDR, have also worked with the plant medicines, psychedelics. That was very transformative.
I'm actually excited that you mentioned it. I've heard and I'm curious your opinion. And it might be Dr. Gabor Mate who's talked to people about it. I could be getting it wrong, but I've heard that they come out the other end with this new connection. Was yours like that?
I should preface that by saying the psychedelic therapy that I've done wasn't with healthcare practitioners, but very, very intentional, very much for the purpose of healing. So I can't say whether or not that would be different from someone else's experience in a healthcare setting. The one thing that I will say about this whole journey with my health is it really anchored me into my connection with my intuition and spirit and just following my own guidance. I think because I was so disappointed that I had outsourced that when I was sick for the first couple of years. And then I had felt so wronged and whatever when she's finally like, well, maybe it's cancer, right? And something shifted in me in that moment where I was like, I am going to take responsibility for my own health. I never want to be in this position again where I'm feeling wronged by this authority power outside of me. So yeah, I've just really anchored into myself. So that's kind of why I eventually tried the psychedelic side of things for the healing. I think is why it is better to do it assisted. The other thing that I've done is somatic experiencing therapy, which is phenomenal.
Can you tell us, for those of us unfamiliar with it, what is that?
And the funny thing is, I'm actually training to be a practitioner and I still struggle to describe it. Essentially, what you're doing is you're working with the capacity of the nervous system to expand the capacity. Essentially, what you do is you're sitting there with your practitioner, and the practitioner will guide you through some questions, but it's all about your internal experience. So my favorite way to describe is at the beginning, the practitioner will say, okay, are you comfortable there? Can you get more comfortable in your seat? Oh, yeah, sure. So whatever. Move around, grab a pillow, blanket. The client will usually be like, yeah, okay, I'm good. And then the practitioner's like, well, how do you know you're good? What is your body telling you that tells you you're comfortable? And that for a lot of people is like,
Oh,
oh crap, I've never actually thought about what are the cues my body is giving me, right? That tell me I'm
mhm.
comfortable. But that is somatic experiencing from my perspective. Like what's showing up in your body right now. We will resource to certain things. That's what brings us back to a place of either neutrality or feeling good or safe or comfortable. So for me, natural light is one of my things, or how the light in these curtains is really soft. I love that.
Okay.
And so
Yeah.
then they would ask, well, how do you know you love that? Well, it's like when I look at this light here, I feel my eyes soften. I feel my shoulders soften a little bit, like my body feels a little heavier. That's literally somatic experiencing is you're just attuning to what's going on in the body and then following it through different things. So it's great to sit in the comfort of this light. If I sit here for too long, I'm probably going to act like my nervous system will get activated and then I'll have to switch to something else. And when you get to a certain capacity, once the practitioner feels like you're at a good place or you feel like you're at a good place, then you can start exploring whatever it is you want to explore. So like I have this thing that keeps coming up in my life and I want to explore it. So then you just like, okay, well, if you even just think of that thing without going into the story of it, what do you notice in your body? And
Mhm.
so you're kind of teasing the nervous system, not teasing the nervous system, but pulling things apart within the nervous system to allow the nervous system capacity to expand and to allow
Okay.
your body to settle. And if you do that enough over time, you're able to work through different things. And it's honestly, that's been life-changing for me. It's helped. It's very subtle work. I remember the first couple sessions that I did as a client. I was like, oh my gosh, I'm paying all this money for nothing. But then I would notice after the session, I was exhausted. And I was like, okay, I'm doing something even if I don't know what I'm doing. It's phenomenal, and I highly recommend it. Dr. Peter Levine is the one who
Okay,
came
I'm
up with
familiar
it.
with that name. Yeah.
Yeah. And it's honestly, the work is almost like magic. Like it's kind of hard to wrap the brain around, but it's beautiful.
So, Sarah, online, some of us, and now this might be a certain type of somatic experiencing. Sometimes we
Yeah.
come across these videos where they're postures,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
then do they prompt perhaps to think about something, and then do the movements help it release somehow? Or I don't know if that.
So I can't speak too much to that because I mean we will do some of that kind of stuff like in a session if something comes up and or me as the client I notice myself kind of back away. That's just my nervous system response from whatever topic's coming up. We might slow that down in a session and say, okay, slowly back up and notice what happens in your system, or use your hand to like push away and notice what happens. So we might work through some of that stuff. But I haven't finished the last year of training. And so I'm wondering if more of the stuff that we see online is going to come up
Yeah.
in the last year, because I've had that thought too of like, this is not the same. Yeah. Well, it's that sense of introspection, right? It's the ability to be in tune enough with the body to sense what's happening. And a lot of people need to do a lot of work there. For some people, it is easy to go, oh, I know I'm comfortable or I know I'm good to go because of all these things. And then someone else is like, I have no idea how to sense inside my body, right?
And to add on to what you're saying, and I feel like this will probably sound familiar to you, those of us with high ACE, adverse childhood event scores, we knock our introspection off. We learn to ignore it with our trauma responses. So a lot of us with these illnesses who have trauma from before, or just the illness experience itself, have trauma. So that's important for people to know that some of us, we've knocked it offline, or we've learned to ignore it or change it to something that serves our trauma defenses.
Yeah, absolutely. And that reminds me of in the somatic experiencing, when we experience something that is traumatic, the reason usually that it becomes traumatizing is because we have an incomplete nervous system response. Something has stopped our nervous system from moving through what it needs to move through to clear that. And so something has usually interrupted that. That's why we're traumatized from that event. And so the somatic experiencing, eventually, you're not going to do it in the first session, but eventually when you get there, you're working to complete that nervous system response. And so it's honestly, it's so cool. There's lots of cool videos that Dr. Peter Levine has online that kind of demonstrate it more. And like I said, I'm not done my training.
Perhaps in future years, after you've been practicing for a bit, you can come back and then you can tell
and
us your
explain it
thoughts
better, right?
on the hands-on. Yeah, if you're okay with that in the future.
Oh, I'd love to. Yeah.
We'd like to hear it. And people, in the meantime, they can Google Dr. Peter Levine, because his name is also familiar to me, is legit. So you could check him out. I'll take us back a little bit to your journey. So you mentioned you did some EMDR, some psychedelic therapy, and you voiced that ideally people to be monitored with their practitioners. However, there's also the human reality that this was bigger than that for you. This is you learning to trust your own intuition, and you needed to do that for you. So after the psychedelic therapy, were there any other types of therapy modalities?
The somatic experiencing was the only other one, that came afterwards. And that was like, I don't even know how to describe it. I just felt very drawn to it. I think in general, I dissociate really easily from my body. I'm usually off wherever. And I have a really hard time being in my body. And so the somatic experience, I've done yoga on and off for, I don't know, probably 15 or 16 years now. But even that, like, I fight it all the time, fight being in my body. And so the somatic experiencing was kind of just my way of reconnecting to my body in a different way.
That seems common when people who have had these illnesses for the longer amounts of time. It seems helpful that they come back around and then they do reconnect to their body, because when you're in severe pain, they tend to dissociate. When things are psychologically horrifying, we tend to dissociate. That's a little too intense and scary. We're going to go somewhere that we think is a little safer. Our illnesses put us into positions of perhaps they're going to dissociate very often. And then did you switch practitioners, or did you land and did you keep that one afterwards to kind of where you were going in your healing journey?
Yeah, I did that for a couple of years and then just noticed that I just wasn't getting anywhere. So I actually stopped doing all of that, stopped working with the Chinese medicine doctor. And I don't know if this is like the cynic in me or what, but there's been a couple of times with certain practitioners where I'm like, do you even really care, or are you just enjoying the money that you're getting from me buying all these supplements and stuff?
You bring up a good like a valid and important point for our community, because there's different degrees of Lyme literacy.
Yeah.
Right. So we don't really have a lot of regulation on when somebody's saying they're Lyme literate. ILADS is where the most up-to-date treatment protocol research, and they train the practitioners there out of the United States. To your point, every private pay practitioner, you have to almost meet them to see their intention as well. I'm lucky now,
Yeah.
my treatment team is bang on. However, I don't specify who my practitioners were early on. I did also pivot after a couple of years and plateaued, but I never got to your 70%. I got barely 2 or 3% over a couple of years with mine. And so I just completely stopped it cold turkey, because I knew I needed to practitioner shop at that point, because the Lyme literacy was not there, and I'd spent a lot of money at that point. I was still working and had spent probably 20 or 30 grand on something that sort of just gave me a result and slowed my symptoms. However, I still needed to go get that test there, so it did serve a purpose in the greater scheme of it. But you bring up a very good point that a lot of us struggle with, is we hope that our treatment providers care. So it sounds like, so you stopped everything there. Did you have any symptoms come back when you stopped everything? Did you?
I didn't, no. And like it was something that I had thought about on and off for, I think, probably that last year before I actually finally quit. And I was, I was nervous. I didn't want to, regress, or didn't really know how it was going to go, but it kept coming up. It kept coming up of like, you know what, maybe just stop everything and focus, keep focusing on like the trauma healing and that side of things. And eventually I just couldn't like ignore that call or that voice telling me to stop. And so I did. And like I had thousands of dollars worth of the tinctures and the supplements like filed. Yeah. I really wrestled with that decision, but something just told me just stop. And so I did. And yeah, I never regressed. My symptoms never got any worse. They just gradually continued to get better.
I have heard of some people exactly what you're describing, actually, where they say to me, I just slowly kept doing what I was doing, and just very, very slowly, years, just kept slowly getting better. And I'm like, wow, that's great.
And it's interesting. I can't remember if it was when I was first diagnosed or what, but I remember reading, no one recovers from this. This is kind of a life sentence, whatever. And I did not like that at all. I was like, I can't think that way. And so I remember just trying to shut that out. And I was a part of a bunch of different groups online. And I was on the groups for a number of years, but constantly seeing everyone's struggle was very, very hard for me, because I didn't want to like take that on. Even though like I was living it and it was my experience, I don't know how to describe it. I just didn't want it to be my story, I guess, or like all that my story was. And at the time, the whole time that I was sick, I was doing a ton of personal development work with this one lady who I just adore. And I can't remember, probably in the books I read or something, they talk about don't claim it as, don't say my whatever it is, right? And so I was always very careful to say the Lyme disease. I didn't want to claim it in that way.
So it sounds like you've made the illness a separate kind of entity from yourself. Like it's not who you are at your core. It's something that you're dealing with. So you started to talk about it even in your own head. You wouldn't say my Lyme disease inside of me, it's mine. You'd say the Lyme disease or it or something.
And even now when I talk about it in the past, I will just call it an autoimmune condition, because just for me, the name Lyme has so much weight to it, right? When I first learned about it, it was kind of like, no one recovers. It's something you'll have for life, blah, blah, blah. And I was like, nope, not subscribing to that. But that was still just like the narrative. And then I remember hearing, and I don't know when this was very early on though. I remember hearing a story of someone who had recovered completely. And I anchored into that so hard. I was like, if one person can, that means it's possible. And that's all I care about. Right. And so I focused so much more on that one tiny little possibility than all these really just awful experiences that a lot of people have. That was always kind of just my thing. And then as, you know, time has gone on, I hear more and more stories about people that are having complete healings.
Remission states without symptoms for days, months, years.
Yeah.
All of that stuff is possible.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, I'm very grateful. I don't know why I was lucky enough to have that awareness at the time of not claiming it and just keeping myself distant from it. But again, like I've just been lucky in a lot of ways that I've had a lot of great friends, like even you, so knowledgeable about it that I feel I've been able to be a little bit ignorant, and haven't had to dive in too much to it for a variety of reasons. So
Yeah.
I acknowledge that I have been very lucky. And even my friend telling me where to go and everything's just kind of fallen into place for me
Yeah.
for whatever reason.
But that's the other thing, is that everybody's pathway to get there is so incredibly different. Even a mindset that's helpful for healing is slightly different for every single person as well. As you were talking, you actually reminded me, because I actually forgot what you were talking about prior. And as you were talking, I don't know if you saw on the screen, I was like, yeah, okay, now I remember what you were actually talking about before.
Oh, yeah.
I added something to fill in. So thank you for that.
Before that, we were just talking about how I had come to this realization that I was gonna stop.
Mindsets.
Yeah.
Yes,
Oh,
got it.
yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, so you've mentioned your mindset. It's been helpful to separate yourself from
Yeah.
the illnesses. In terms of resiliency, now
Mhm.
it's either it's there or you're forced to develop it on the spot if you never had much resiliency prior. Where do you attribute your resiliency coming from in life?
Yeah, that's a good question, Lacey. To be honest, I had a lot of stuff that I went through as a kiddo and into my teens, early 20s, but I hadn't really dealt with much of it until the Lyme journey. And I think that I had been building that resiliency a little bit through university. I was the first one in my immediate family to go to university, and even just getting through that was a massive accomplishment for me. And so I think that that had kind of started tapping me into what it meant to be resilient and work through things as they arose. But for sure, the whole journey with my health, that was the thing for me that just kind of opened me right up, got me to dig in, got me to like face some things and work through and persevere. There was two separate times where I didn't feel well enough to work, right? And then everything that comes with that of feeling dependent, feeling like a burden, feeling very hopeless in a lot of ways. And so I would say mostly just the journey of healing
That's
itself.
super interesting to me.
Yeah.
Yeah, because sometimes people have a lot of their resilience they attribute to earlier on in life.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I mean, I do believe I was very resilient as a kiddo too. It just was so ingrained in me from such a young age of you just survive, you just keep going, whatever, that I didn't really recognize it as resiliency in the time because I was just in survival mode.
Yeah.
But then with the illness, it was kind of this moment of, well, now you have to. Now you have to dig in, right? It wasn't enough to just keep coasting anymore.
It asks the very most difficult things of you, these healing journeys that you could possibly imagine.
Totally. And for me, going back to the mindset too, I genuinely consider the journey with my health the greatest gift I have been given. Like I said, it reconnected me to my intuition. It helped me take my power back in so many different ways, and not just in terms of my health, finances. That was probably one of the biggest things early on before I even had that doctor's appointment where she suggested cancer. I was getting so sick and I was nearing graduation. And I just remember feeling so defeated. My mom had always struggled with money when I was a kiddo. And so money was always a thing for me. And I was so excited to be like nearing graduation. I was going to get a good job. I was finally going to have money. And then I'm so sick that I'm spending all this money on treatment can't work, right? And it was just like there was something that went off in my mind, kind of this red flag of it's really interesting that this pattern is repeating itself now, but there's a new reason for it. And so like
Yeah.
that was totally my thing of there's something going on here. And it took me years, right, to figure that out. And I've gone through this whole big financial journey along with this health healing journey and trauma healing journey and stuff. But the journey with my health has been my greatest teacher. And I would not, as difficult as it was, I hope that I never go back to those days of like wondering if I'm going to survive. I'm very, very grateful for the journey.
It forces you to look at those things that we're too busy in life otherwise, or we won't look at it till, like it's a pain here now, we can kind of keep going.
Yeah.
These illnesses, no, they turn the lens right back on you, and you're going to
Yeah.
look at those things you've never wanted to look at, perhaps, like
Yeah.
depending how long you've been sick for. So thank you
Yeah.
for explaining that. So it sounds like in many ways, although we don't hope people become sick, through being sick you've gained gifts, and even,
Oh, for sure.
and it sounds like you said increased resiliency, self-awareness, self-physical, already from talking to you,
Yep.
somatic experiencing, body awareness, and now all these things that you're probably going to teach somatic experiencing in the future to
Eventually.
others. So
Yeah,
eventually,
totally.
the distant
Eventually, yeah.
future, no rush.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, because rushing can trigger sympathetic nervous system as well in people. So
Oh, totally.
so don't rush, no rushing.
I was just going to say that's something, even though now I'm at a point where I consider myself healed, I don't have any of the symptoms I had before. The only thing that I still feels kind of like residual is the word recall.
Okay.
That's the only thing. And like that is one that I have so much almost shame or embarrassment over because when I'm struggling to grasp for a word or reach for a word, right? I feel just unintelligent sometimes, but that's really the only one that I still struggle with. I don't have any of the other symptoms, but in my healing journey, I've noticed, and I think this is a result of the trauma as a kiddo. My nervous system loves to be it's either in fight, flight, or freeze. I'm getting better at being in the in-between, especially the last little while, which makes sense also with the Lyme journey and probably why it was as bad as it was sometimes for me, because I'm like on or I'm off. I'm pushing myself to the absolute max, or I'm in bed because I can't push myself anymore. And so that's been interesting on the other side of my healing journey to notice. There's so much within my nervous system that I'm still, which is why I'm doing the somatic experiencing work. I just still have so much work to do in my nervous system outside of the autoimmune realm.
Yeah, and it takes a lot of time. I'm curious your thoughts on it. Actually, when you said,
Yeah.
you made a query, you said I was always going stress response, fight, flight, or freeze. What we know about the fight flight response is a stress response, even in short bursts, it forces your body to excrete more cortisol. And then in a healthy person, exercise and things can help to slowly reduce that cortisol, bring it back to normal. But in your case, if you're constantly going one or the other or multiple, you have way too much cortisol, and then that affects the whole hormonal and immune system and healing. So
Yeah.
to your point, that's why the nervous system work is also so important with these illnesses. So
The more that I've learned about it over the years, the more that it just makes sense.
yeah, even myself included, that's the tricky part, is learning to manage the middle ground kind of between the two. But for people listening, there's a lot of tools out there that can help with that on your healing journey.
Yes. One of the other things that I did, and this was 3 and a bit years ago. So this was right after when I had felt like I had already kind of recovered from the Lyme, like I wasn't having any more symptoms. I've been doing yoga trainings on and off for the last 16, 17 years. And so I did a Kundalini yoga training at the time, and that was also incredible. And that is kind of what started my curiosity around the nervous system and learning more about that. And then it was shortly after that I did more somatic experiencing work too. Kundalini yoga, yeah, it's a very, I mean, all yogas are technical, but Kundalini yoga is another level. But it's been phenomenal for me and just helping to regulate my nervous system.
Yoga's one of those things that incorporated nervous system stuff into their routines for so long, but they've not,
Yes.
like, some of them have, but a lot of them just consider it like their yoga practice. But it is
Yeah.
actually nervous system toning, a lot of the breathing with moving, and some of them have the more vibratory, that kind of breathing with moving, and it's nervous
Yeah.
system work. Kundalini, for
Totally.
people listening,
Yeah.
you may want to check that one out.
Yeah.
So
It's fascinating. Yeah.
so
Yeah. Yeah.
we hear a mix of answers on this one. I'll use myself as an example to guide us into it. In terms of the mental health or the neuropsychiatric symptoms of these illnesses, I was somebody that it made existing diagnosis a lot worse, and it added on actual symptoms, mental health symptoms I never had in my life prior. So to list a couple, like the anxiety, panic, depression, made much worse, but it also threw some new symptoms I never quite had before. For yourself, would you say
Yeah.
you're someone that it threw completely new stuff at you, or did it make existing things that might have been lingering worse, or both?
Yeah, I would describe it as just things that I already had going on, it just made worse. So the anxiety, that was normal from when I was a kiddo, but it made it much worse. I had been functioning relatively well up until that point, and then those last 2 years of university, the anxiety was just out of control. So that was worse. That sense of hopelessness, and I've never really identified with depression, but I know I've had depressive episodes, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
And that's been
Oh, yeah.
present since I was a kiddo as well. So I think it made what was already there worse. I didn't have anything new show up that I can think of off the top of my head that wasn't already there. It just added to.
Made it worse, more
Yeah.
noticeable. Okay.
Yeah.
And with that,
Yeah.
does that apply for the dissociation as well? Because I think you mentioned you did that a little bit
Yeah,
prior to
like
getting sick.
that was totally something that was present. That's kind of how I survived my like
Yeah.
childhood.
Yeah.
And so, but I think, as like I was a teenager and got older and had more autonomy, I didn't notice a lot of the symptoms as much because I was able to just kind of distract myself with life and just kind of do my own thing. When I was navigating my healing journey and just everything after that, then I noticed that a lot more.
What, if anything, helped you get through it aside from mindset?
Yeah.
Like, helped you get through this at your hardest times, or just
Mm.
through the times? Also, while you're pondering, my pen exploded while I was talking to you, so I'm going to grab another one while
Okay,
you're
sounds good.
answering that. It literally exploded. The spring shot off while you were talking. I was like, yeah, I'm not sure if you saw it, but
No, I
apparently.
didn't.
So I've got a new one now. We're good to go.
Good. Um, the big thing that stands out for me is the being in nature. That was so soothing for me. I actually very vividly remember a dream that I had when I was at one of my sickest times. Wasn't working, contemplating what my life is going to be and am I ever going to recover. And I had this dream that I was in a hospital. These people took me out of the hospital. I was like too sick to walk. They laid me on the ground, just on the earth, on the grass. And I could literally feel the earth like bringing me back to life. And that dream has stuck with me. So I learned about earthing and grounding and all that stuff. And I had known a bit about it before then, had this dream, and I just had this feeling of just get outside. And that's part of why we moved to Victoria. I just wanted to be outside. And so nature and being outside and grounding and connecting to nature and to the earth has always been just such a strong resource for me. So that I would say has been number one. And then the other thing is probably, I know we talked about the mindset thing already, but the mindset intuition thing, just how much I anchored into my intuition. I guess that's separate, and just use that to guide me, right? And that's probably the one thing that I would just advise everyone, because there's so many different doctors you can go to. There's different protocols. There's lots of choice, and it's hard to know what the right thing is to do. And I think just the number one thing is we just have to each follow our intuition, and it'll guide us where we're meant to go.
So nature, and then number two is mindset/intuition.
Intuition. Yeah. Yeah. There was lots of other like little things, but
Yeah. Mine, I give a lot of credit to our dog. He would lay on my legs, and I had lost a lot of feeling. I probably about 80% of sensation in the external and internal body back when I was sicker, but he would lay on it. And for that period of time when he would lay on it, I'd feel less dead. I'd be like, my legs
Yeah.
are alive, and he's fine with whatever I'm willing or able to give him for a dog. I'll have to give him a hero medal one day of
Right.
sorts, a
Yeah.
ceremony. And so, if you could give advice to family and friends of those dealing with this illness, what might that be in terms of how they interact with you or anything like that?
That's tricky. I was lucky. I had some family members that were just so loving and supportive. And even if they didn't understand what was going on and they didn't know anything about Lyme or how it impacts a person, they were just very caring. And that was lovely. And then, but I did also have the flip side of people that just didn't understand and lacked the empathy and didn't know how to relate, right? Some people kind of ignored it and it was the elephant in the room. And I don't recommend that. For those family members that I had that were very loving and caring, like even though they didn't understand it, that was such a saving grace. In a lot of ways, it was nice to feel safe and I felt like I could just let go and relax around them. I didn't have to try to keep up appearances. I didn't want to make anyone think that I was sick, right? It was nice to just let down my guard a little bit. But I guess the advice that I would give is even just being curious, right? And asking questions and asking how someone's doing and the little things make such a difference. I remember there was only certain things that I could have for snacks when I started to get better and I could eat more foods. Because when I was really watching my diet, the only thing that I would have that was a treat was fruit, right? But the way that they would even make separate foods or meals for me or have things that I could eat, that was so lovely. And it's just nice to feel loved on when you're going through this journey when you don't know if there's a light at the end of the tunnel, right? Yeah, ask questions and just show that you care. And even in the little ways, if you can show that you're paying attention or that you're trying, it makes a huge difference.
And so, when you're saying when they incorporate for your dietary restrictions,
Yeah,
my brain is thinking inclusivity. Don't forget
yeah,
about these people because they may have diagnosis or disabilities now. Make it so they can still come, and
yeah,
that sometimes is a lot of work, but make it so they can still come, and don't make them feel bad about it. And it sounds like
yeah,
in your case, be curious, ask questions.
yeah.
Awesome.
Right? Because some people don't know, and I think they're kind of afraid of the subject, and it's like, well, just ask.
Yeah, get it if you can get engaged, and exactly.
I was just going to mention when we were talking about those three things. Well, I only ended up coming up with two things, the nature and my
Yeah.
intuition and mindset. But I should mention that my spiritual journey or my connection to spirit, night and day difference between
Spirituality then would be
before
number three.
yeah, yeah. Would that was a huge part of the journey. And I should mention it because it's such a big part of my life now. And I know
Oh, for
people
sure.
watching this will probably like, well, Sarah, you missed like the biggest piece. But I mean, and to me, they all go together, right? My connection to nature, my connection to my intuition,
Yeah.
and just yeah, spiritual connection, I guess, all very much forged during that time
Yeah.
and have just continued to blossom since then. So I just wanted to mention that because I
Yeah.
know I'll have at least one friend watch it and listen to it and be like, how'd you miss that?
Yeah. Yeah. I appreciate you adding it in there. And I agree with you that they actually kind of tie into each other. So
Yeah.
that would be your defense answer. So it sounds like later future you'll delve into somatic experiencing. Do you have any dreams of what you'd hope would happen for the community going forward?
Yeah. So, I haven't thought of that at all. It's been interesting to me. I've noticed the last 6 to 8 months or so, I've had a few conversations with people who have started talking a little bit more about the connection of trauma and those who end up with Lyme disease or the co-infections. And for me, that was my intuitive understanding, at least for myself. Like I can't speak for other people, but I fully believe that like I was probably more susceptible due to the amount of trauma that I had experienced and just to the state of my nervous system, my immune system, just like the health of my being, even before I caught.
I'll just really quickly
Yeah.
interject something. There
Yeah.
is research in the fields of psychology and medicine where people with the higher ACE scores, adverse childhood trauma, are more predisposed to negative or adverse health in future years, later years of life. I did read literature on why it increases risk factors for autoimmune disorders as well, is one of the other ones, the categories. So
Which I find so interesting. And I haven't talked about this at all, but the last 6 years when I was working in corrections. And so I'm well aware of that. The ACE score, right? And just how trauma impacts a person and what the resulting impacts, right? Like I've read and I've heard different things about how it impacts health in the immune system and all of that stuff. Like I know my experience with Lyme, and I'm nervous, I guess, to suggest that there could be more there because whatever, it can bring up some different things for different people. But the reason I'm saying this is because 6 or so months ago, I had a conversation with that same friend. She's the one that had really pushed me to get tested. And I know I've talked to her a little bit about how linked I've noticed the trauma and the illness were for me. And she was the one that she brought it up, and she had listened to this podcast as well where they were talking specifically about Lyme disease and trauma and the connection. I find that very fascinating. And even my work in corrections being so trauma focused and just seeing such a gap, I guess, in people's understanding of being trauma informed, as well as we just need more resources and more support for helping people work through trauma. People of all different types of backgrounds, and so I don't see myself focusing specifically on the Lyme community, but I would be more than happy to, especially once I'm at the end of my training and feeling just well versed in everything and feeling ready for that part of my journey. I know that it's going to be all about helping people heal from the trauma.
Okay.
Because it impacts every area of our life. It impacts our relationships, it impacts our finances, our work, our health, our everything. So mental health.
It shapes our literal life patterns develop out of unhealed trauma and coping mechanisms, everything. So much. I'd be curious to see where that takes you in the future. Now, I did forget to ask you a question early on that I ask everybody. Did mold or mold illness play a factor in your healing journey or not?
I was never tested for anything mold related. And so I'm gonna say no, but I would be interested. I grew up in a home where there was a wet basement. I've for sure been exposed to that at some point in time. But yeah, I was never tested. Yeah.
So a query of maybe past exposures, but in your healing journey, it sounds like you weren't necessarily needing to put the heavy hitting mold treatments in there or anything like that.
Yeah. And I was somewhat aware of it. I know you had mentioned it at some point in time, and I think other people had mentioned it as well. But that was never anything that we did testing on or treatment for.
Okay, I'm glad to hear, because it is a heck of a mess if you start to dig into the environment. It's tricky.
Well, and do you know Rachel Braden, yoga girl online? Have you ever come across her stuff?
I don't think so. No.
Okay. No. So I followed her for years and years ago. That's kind of, I think, where I got most of my awareness of that from. Anyways, I think she was living in Aruba at the time. Home ended up being filled with mold, had to throw out literally everything. Then they moved back to, I can't remember where she is, if she's in Norway or where. But anyways, moved back to her hometown, and she's talked a little bit about just how the healing journey, but also how traumatic it was to just have to throw everything out and leave everything. And
you actually hit the nail on the head with that description. It can be traumatic because your living space is now considered perhaps not safe. And what someone else I interviewed, they described it. She says, it takes away the spot where you're supposed to be able to go lick your wounds, referencing animal mentality. Yeah. So I'm happy to hear that that wasn't your experience. Now, in your most struggle of times, and if someone in the community and they're still quite sick hearing this, what might you say to them? In the countries they live, the money doesn't grow on the trees there either. It's the weirdest thing. I don't know what's wrong with these trees. Bad soil, perhaps. So what would you say to them?
Yeah. That's a tough question. I'm noticing because I think
it's the hardest one. I'm sorry. No, that's the hardest example.
It's kind of great in a way, because the first place my mind went to was noticing my somatic response, my nervous system response, and how had a lot of apprehension to that question because it took me back into my own experience at that time. Literally 9 years ago at this time, I was jobless, just graduated university, had next to no money. I think I was scraping by maybe 1,400-1,500 bucks a month. I did
Yeah.
Reiki and was working a lot with essential oils and stuff at the time. And so I was making a little bit of money, but that took me back to that place and just how hopeless I felt. And as you're asking the question, I'm feeling this, but how did I do that? And so there's a part of me that when you ask that, I kind of panic because I'm like, I don't even
Sorry about
know.
that.
No, it's fine. But it's like, I don't even know how I got through it. But I guess the thing that I would say to someone is I have been there. I know how devastating it could be. Like, I feel a little bit emotional right now, right? Of just like, I know what it's like to not have a clue where you're going to get the money from, to not have a clue even what you're dealing with or what the journey is going to look like or how you're going to get through it or if you're going to get through it. I think my biggest advice, and it might sound so cheesy to some people, is just pray and just listen for that voice inside and just keep putting one foot in front of the other. There were months where I couldn't afford treatment. There were months where I was trying to decide between certain supplements of what I was going to pay for and what I couldn't. That is the reality. And there was months where I had to force myself to work because I didn't have the money to just stay home and nurse myself back to health. And I kept surrendering to the experience and I kept praying a ton. And my motto was kind of just one foot in front of the other, just keep going. For anyone that's in that place right now, I'm so sorry that you're going through this. Just please know that there's other people that have been there. Reach out for support if you know anyone that is going through that, or even myself, anyone's welcome to reach out to. Just keep going. Don't give up.
So reach
Yeah.
out to others because we're so starved for validation because that elephant in the room diagnosis.
Yeah.
And it's not common that we're getting the full capacity of support from everybody we know per se. But I
Yeah.
also heard Sara say she's validating. She's saying, I get it. I've been there. It sucks. Sorry to hear. But just don't ever fully give up.
Yeah.
Just keep going, keep surviving. So thank you, Sara. I really appreciate that. And is there anything that I didn't touch upon that you'd like to share about your healing journey?
I even think about how we know each other, right? And we know each other because of our health experience. Like it's the most synchronous thing.
Well, let's help people understand that. Like Lyme and
Yeah.
co-infection community itself, it's a beautiful community.
Yeah.
I can say that firsthand. And I met Sara, and she was the one prompting me to go get Lyme disease testing. And I didn't know
Yeah.
her that well when she was prompting me, and I listened to her. I was like, okay, she seems to know. She seems pretty confident that I probably have
Yeah.
Lyme disease, and she was bang on. And she was a fellow patient of Lyme. She was a patient with Lyme disease, telling me I have Lyme disease and I had Lyme disease.
Yeah.
And then
Right.
we tied in another mutual person because it's like all this health healing stuff, and
Yeah.
there's a beautiful community perhaps that can help pick you up if you are struggling with the people around you. So go to the people that get it as much as you can as well.
Yeah.
Because you're less likely to feel invalidated and trigger
Yes.
just that cascade of negative emotions. So
Yes, totally. Yeah, I just think through the whole journey, life connected me to just some incredible people. And some of it was very specific, right? In our case, we met at a family function and started talking about some things we were going through, and it was very whatever. That was our connection, right? And that's kind of been our connection since then, is just going through this. And you mentioned Marie-Eve and other beautiful people. Some of the people that I've met, it's because of their own health journeys, and some of the people I've met just because I was on a healing journey and I was seeking out different things, and I've come across these beautiful people. I don't even know how to describe them because Maria comes to mind. I took a course that her and one of her friends, Yamuna, who's just a beautiful guide in my life as well now, took this course from them years ago, and it was about the hero's journey.
oh, okay,
Yeah. And so that you mentioned that. And so anyways, and it's funny because it's on this journey I've been on. Like I took that course once, met both those ladies, haven't taken any courses from them since, but like follow them on social media, and they're just like these just beautiful human beings who just have like medicine in the way that they share and just the way that they live their lives. And I've noticed that through my journey of I've just been connected, and you are one of these people, to just the most beautiful people, just it just feel like medicine to me, right? I just love,
Yeah.
even though I'm not interacting with them all the time or you all the time, right? It's just like you're there, and it's just been lovely. So I think just so much of my journey, even though it was very, very, very difficult at times, like sprinkled with just divine synchronicity and just these really beautiful moments and so many different turning points for me. It has helped to align me more with who I am as a person, how I want to be living my life, even outside of health and all that stuff. But it's aligned me more to myself and my path. And so, yeah, just very grateful for everyone that I've met, everything that I've learned. Grateful to be here today and sharing a little bit about my experience. So thank you very much.
Yeah, my pleasure. We're very also grateful to have you. I don't disagree with any of that. I guess, Sarah, with that being said, we just want to thank you so much for your candid sharing on all these topics. That surely will help to normalize it for others in the community. So we appreciate that. With that being said, that concludes our episode of the Your Lyme Matters podcast. So thank you again, Sarah.
Thank you, Lacey. I appreciate it.